Earthling, the term supposedly used by aliens to identify the beings from planet Earth. Prokaryotic organism identified and represented as all indigenous organism on planet Earth according to so-called science. The first form of life on planet Earth, with a simple circular DNA form and unicellular structure, therefore have superior rights compared to the subordinate rights of eukaryote organisms, with a complex linear DNA form and multi-cellular structure. Melaninated, skin with a dark pigmentation due to presence of melanin, a predominance of black eumelanin found in the skin and a predominance of black plasma neuromelanin found in the brain. The term melaninated is not exclusive for indigenous earthborn inhabitants because not all melaninated, dark skin beings are earthborn according to research. The descendants and lineage of the invading alien perpetrators, Nibiruians, were melaninated, and many were earthborn, but of course they were not indigenous to planet Earth because their ancestral planet was Nibiru. And they were not considered to be an inhabitant due to their status and lineage to their ancestral Nibiruians, therefore the appropriate classification is occupant instead of inhabitant. Since the melaninated earthborn occupants were among the occupational forces occupying planet Earth, vis-a-vis not all skin folks are kinfolks, but a different species, fruitarian, describes the eating system to nourish the physical body. In transition to a breatharian and the divine being status, the eating system is primarily fruits, nuts, seeds, and vegetables that are misclassified as vegetables, e.g., tomatoes and legumes. According to the comparative anatomical chart, which compare teeth structures, Earth beings are specifically designed to be fruitarian, definitely not omnivore. This chart also exposes the teeth structure of the Nibiruians, the invading aliens, who imported and advocated their omnivore dietary practices on planet Earth to the detriment of the health and well-being of the indigenous earthborn inhabitants. Nibiruians identified as the inhabitants of planet Nibiru referred to a reptilian species, misclassified as an Anunnaki. Nearly everyone in modern time erroneously referred to this dysfunctional alien species as an Anunnaki. For clarification, the term Anunnaki is translated to represent Anu. Anu sent those, NNA, from heaven, Ki, to Earth. Therefore, the so-called Anunnaki is a bloodline, not a race, an alien species, not an evolved extraterrestrial species, but a devolved dysfunctional bloodline of aliens, according to some research. Anunnaki are described as a shape-shifting reptilian species that brought omnivore practices, eating meat, consuming the life of a living species, to planet Earth, which was adopted by Earth beings. Actually, the dysfunctional bloodline is inferior to its creation, Earth beings, in their current devolved primitive condition. Ignorantly and unknowingly, Earth beings declare their allegiance and reverence to specific members of the dysfunctional bloodline of aliens, who were worshipped as deities. Anu, king of planet Nibiru, identified and worshipped as king of gods. Enki, Anu's firstborn son, with Kasabine, identified and worshipped as Ptah, lord of earth, the developer, and the Greek god Kronos. Ninhursag, Anu's firstborn daughter, with concubine, identified and worshipped as Mother Earth. Enlil, Anu's first son, from official spouse, identified and worshipped as Jehovah and Yahweh. Ningushsida, Anu's grandson from Enki, identified and worshipped as Thoth. Marduk, Anu's grandson from Enki, identified and worshipped as Ra, the supreme god, Bel, and the Roman god Jupiter. Utu, Anu's great-grandson, from Enki, identified and worshipped as Allah, and their respective de facto domains, Israel, Jerusalem, Egypt, Kemet, Judah, Mecca, Atlantis, Tartaria, Lemuria, etc. Classified as de facto domains because they were established directly or indirectly by the invading aliens that colonized planet Earth. Collectively, the Anu bloodline is a devolved and dysfunctional alien species guilty of a multitude of universal law violations against planet Earth and her inhabitants, yet demand worship and allegiance according to the ancient stone text. When the Nibiruians invaded planet Earth, they found sentient beings, who were deemed primitive because they did not speak, but perhaps used telepathic communication and lived in harmony with nature. Were genetically engineered by the unethical devolved aliens, with a worship gene, to ensure invading aliens would be worshipped as deities, divine being, the terminology used in this decree to identify the evolved version of the current indigenous earthborn inhabitants custodians, on planet Earth. Occasionally, the terms are used interchangeably. However, the term divine being is the evolved state and condition, with activated supernatural spiritual gifts, unity consciousness focus, all-knowing, true sovereign, and breatharian. While the term indigenous earthborn inhabitants is the devolved state and condition, without activated supernatural spiritual gifts, and a self-preservation focus. The two terms represent different stages of development. Analogy: as a being, an adult is mature and advanced in life experiences, but, on the other hand, a child is also a being, but not mature and unskilled in life experiences. The original name is not known. In this decree, diving beings, indigenous earthborn inhabitants, are identified by their genetic biological anatomy, exclusively, melaninated indigenous and aboriginal earthborn inhabitants, who are the heirs with inherited heredity rights, as custodians, so-called trustees, prokaryotic organisms within all realms of planet Earth, also identified as chaos beings. The diving beings were the initially indigenous earthborn inhabitants of one of the sky realms, prior to the deforestation of the gigantic crystal trees. The perpetrator admitted to engaging in unlawful genetic engineering, violations of universe laws, deactivated DNA, divine memories, and other supernatural abilities were manipulated to devolve the divine beings to functional primitive beings. The term is used interchangeable with the devolved terminology indigenous earthborn inhabitant, which describes the current general devolved condition and mental state. Indigenous identified as the original inhabitants and species, distinguished from aboriginal, who are the descendants from the indigenous, the original in these decrees. The terminology is synonymous with term and description melaninated earthborn inhabitant, and simultaneously related to the evolved terminology divine being. Unaware, some beings may identify themselves as indigenous or aboriginal, but may not identify themselves as earthborn. Some beings are aware that they are neither indigenous nor aboriginal regardless of their outward melaninated appearance. Note: it is not the indigenous earthborn inhabitants' responsibility to persuade or convince melaninated being that they are indigenous, because they might be a faction of the perpetrating occupying forces. Aboriginal, identified as being descendants from the original inhabitants and species, distinguished from indigenous, who are the original. Some beings who are spiritually aware and conscious of the fact that they are a melaninated earthborn inhabitant, however, from a bloodline that is not so-called pure, based on blood group designation and/or so-called mixed race, are corrected. Identified as aboriginal. Planetary identifies the entire planet Earth, inclusive of all realms within planet Earth, defined as plane with a firmament net. Planet operation. Anunnaki was the mission that engaged in invasion, occupation, colonization, and barbaric mining operations of planet Earth by the Nibiruians. Barbaric mining operations, the process used advanced technology to extract and excavate natural resources from planet Earth. Evidence of the barbaric mining and excavation can be seen in many photos of present-day national parks. For example, the following locations appear as they are: canyons and quarries: Red River Gorge, Grand Canyon, USA; Lake Louise, Canada; Tibet, China; Peak District, England; Highlands, Scotland; Snowdonia, Wales; Australia; Blue Mountain, Australia; Tongariro Mountain National Park, New Zealand; Utah State Park; Ugadi Germans, Switzerland; Rainbow Mountain, Peru; Luna Crater Island, Namibia Desert, and Egyptian Desert. At other worldwide locations, evidence of the deforestation of giant silsha tree can be seen in many photos, also located at present-day national parks. Examples include Devil's Tower and Rock of Gibraltar, the most famous. Others exist in Australia, Ethiopia, Venezuela, Tunisia, Canada, Namibia, South Africa, Greece, São Tomé, Senegal, France, Italy, Greenland, Patagonia, Chile, China, Arizona, USA, Pakistan, Russia, New Mexico, and Scotland. Deserts were created at location where deforestation was the focus. Examples include deserts worldwide, on every continent, specifically the Sahara Desert, Africa, Australia, China, and United States. Southwest region. The debris and general excavation waste from the barbaric mining operations was systematically arranged into piles around the outer border of all continents, which created volcanoes. Worldwide, there is an estimate of 750 to 915 volcanoes. Contrary to so-called geological information, the Ring of Fire consists of 452 volcanoes, which are not natural geological formations, but so-called man-made, and was intentionally arranged into a triangle shape by the alien invaders during the barbaric mining operations. According to channeled information, the barbaric mining operations not only harvested natural resources from planet Earth, but concentrated its harvesting operations on a more devious, malevolent, nefarious reason: food and energy sources, which was based on the invading aliens' insatiable omnivore diet, consuming the flesh of sentient beings, eating meat, consuming the life of a living species. Again, according to channeled information, the invading aliens preferred food sources high in melanin, CAS 8049 to 8097-6. The predominant element found in the indigenous Earthborn inhabitants, harvesting organs, a component of the invading aliens' mining operations, describes the process of acquiring the organs, e.g., extracted melanin, stem cells, and other anatomical body parts from indigenous Earthborn inhabitants. The ongoing harvesting process engages in both legal and illegal methods to harvest organs. Legal process includes raising melanin-dominant indigenous Earthborn inhabitant children in adoption and foster care homes. B. Maintaining melanin farms and stem cell farms, orphanages, in rural areas verified via remote viewing. C. Compensation for specific organs. D. Bribery for organs, organ failure or defective. And E. Obtained as result of a death, organ donor, an illegal process through targeted abductions. Melanin chemical is traded and sold on the stock market under chemical identifier CAS 8049 to 8097-6. Entity being identified as both a non-Earthborn physical being, such as an alien, and a non-physical entity, i.e. spiritual entity or energy being that exist between different dimensions, clearly not a divine being, not a human being, and not an earth being. Human being, synonymous with the terminologies human, humanity, mankind, and humankind, identified and representative of eukaryotic organisms, generically included in the term earth being, identified as descendants from the lineage and genetic creations of the Nibiruian invaders, includes both melaninated Earthborn beings, beings with dark skin, and non-melaninated Earthborn beings, beings with so-called pale skin. In service to the gods, in the status of occupant instead of inhabitant, due to their genetic signature and allegiance to the Nibiruian colonizers, includes the so-called blackamoors, beings with a hidden hand, operating colonial de facto system through secret societies. The term melaninated is not exclusive for indigenous Earthborn inhabitant. According to research, in ancient times, when the invading perpetrators, Nibiruians, the so-called gods, walked on planet Earth, they were melaninated and many of their descendants and lineage were Earthborn, but of course they were not indigenous to planet Earth because their ancestral planet was Nibiru, and they were not considered to be an inhabitant due to their status and lineage to their ancestral Nibiruians. Therefore, the appropriate classification is occupant instead of inhabitant, since the melaninated Earthborns were among the party of forces occupying planet Earth. Colonial de facto system abbreviation, colonial de facto system, identifies the programs that control the greater society policies and procedures. Colonial de facto system is adversarial and detrimental to planet Earth and all of her organic species. Colonial de facto system has always been dysfunctional at its core because it is all based on a fiction. Established after an invasion, it is the institutionalization of colonized lands and regulations that establish colonial life, which includes the occupation of various colonial enforcement officers. Also, the unseen results generated via sophisticated AI technology programs, holographic simulations, protocols, policies, and procedures that manage, control, and manipulate colonial de facto organizations' events, narratives, and timelines, etc. It provides components that establish the norms, values, and standards, provides information via controlled media and subliminal entertainment, provides access to resources to pursue goals, livelihood, support for existence, validation, and purpose. Silica, C, a valuable element found in abundance on planet Earth. On planet Earth, on every continent there is a desert location that was previously a silica, C. Forest. The information is based on the content of the desert sand. Silica dioxide, finely ground silica dust particles, is the major constituent found in desert sand. Currently, silica, C, is a valuable commodity that is traded and sold on the stock market. It is a component used in semiconductors for electronic processors. Demigods, the so-called demigods, were descendant and in the lineage of Anu. Most of the so-called demigods were from a melaninated indigenous Earthborn inhabitant mother. All offspring of Nibiruians and so-called demigods received less respect, position, and rank due to being Earthborn occupants, not full-breed Nibiruians, that was born on Nibiru. Earthborn occupants identified as both melaninated, dark skin, and non-melaninated, so-called pale skin, descendants and lineage of Anu, strategically placed in rulership positions over indigenous Earthborn inhabitants and planet Earth's natural resources. Earthborn occupants promote and advocate for Operation Anunnaki agenda, historical invasions, occupations, colonization, and mining operations under the guise of self-preservation. Other present-day Operation Anunnaki agendas include operation and control of colonial de facto organizations, political systems, legal systems, economic systems, educational systems, religious systems, prison systems, media and entertainment systems, transportation systems, farming and food systems, medical systems, vaccinations, etc. The terminology is inclusive of both melaninated and non-melaninated eukaryotic earthborn occupants, multicellular species that may not be known descendants or in the publicized lineage of ENU, but hold prominent positions in colonial de facto organizations inclusive of de facto world organizations, but definitely have an allegiance to further promote and advocate for all operation Anunnaki agendas. The term earthborn occupants is opposite the term earthborn inhabitant, according to research. In ancient times, when the invading alien perpetrators, Nibiruians, the so-called gods, walked on planet Earth, many of their descendants and lineage were considered to be an earthborn because they were born on planet Earth, but they were not considered to as inhabitant due to their status and lineage to their ancestral Nibiruians. Therefore the appropriate classification was occupant instead of inhabitant, since the earthborn's occupants were among the party of forces occupying planet Earth. Economic transactions: the action to subjugate indigenous earthborn inhabitants to servitude, deprived from basic natural resources, rights inherited as indigenous earthborn inhabitants on the indigenous land, required to pay for vegetation and produce grown from planet Earth, pay a rent mortgage to stay on indigenous lands, obtain license and permit to travel indigenous lands, required purchase various insurance policies, paid to have access to natural resources, i.e. water, soil, minerals, etc. Economic systems are illusionary constructs, created to provide indigenous earthborn inhabitants with fiat currency in exchange for natural resources, etc. Under duress, indigenous earthborn inhabitants were coerced, required to enroll in primary and secondary education, register for selective service, etc. Anunnaki is not a species or race. The term is translated Anu. Anu sent those, NNA, from heaven, key, to earth. In the so-called conscious community, I hear many earth beings taking sides, expressing an affinity or preference with either with Enki or with Enlil, even though both are from the same dysfunctional Anu and Anunnaki bloodline, which is detrimental to planet Earth and her indigenous earthborn inhabitants. An observation, not judging: when I hear an earth being expressing an affinity towards one or the other, Enki or Enlil, I subtly inquire about the level of dysfunction in their family. Immediately I can assume they are correct. There is a probability there is a hereditary connection with the dysfunctional Anu and Anunnaki bloodline, according to research. Most extraterrestrial and alien species, which include the Nibiruians, Anunnaki, are melanin dominant, and perhaps resemble the indigenous earthborn inhabitants, but they are not indigenous. Some were born on planet Earth, so some are earthborn. However, their lineage is Nibiruians, so they are not inhabitants on the land. They are occupants because their presence of their capacity on planet Earth are in occupant status. Therefore, some are Nibiruians, Anunnaki, earthborn occupants. Unfortunately, many indigenous earthborn inhabitants. Official public notification: generally, the purpose of a public notification is to post, record, and file documents into the public domain, which simultaneously produces proof of the posting, recording, and filing. The process is a recognized de facto formality to provide official notice to commercial-oriented colonial de facto organizations operating on planet Earth. Similarly, colonial de facto organizations post ads in local newspapers to provide broad notification to a specific Earth being. Accordingly, on March 21, 2023 Gregorian, the Liberation DE JURE Decrees were posted at a de facto organization as an official public notification to colonial de facto organizations. Notice to agent is notice to principal. Notice to principal is notice to agent in harmony with universe, in accordance with universal law, on behalf of planet Earth. The appointed planet Earth ambassador, for this matter, completed, declared, invoked, solidified, and divinely decreed the formality ceremony for the attached 7 Liberation DE JURE Decrees, on March 7, 2023 Gregorian. Presented to the cosmos. Disintegrate is the method used to remove, eradicate, banish, and totally eliminate tangible physical objects by evaporation, dissolution, dissolving a physical and/or energetic object or entity, without leaving residual dead bodies, waste, debris, toxins, contamination, pollution, etc. to impact the planet Earth, her indigenous earthborn inhabitants, or organic species. Advanced nanotechnology, the manipulation of particles, atoms, and molecules, accomplished through solar flares, ultraviolet sun rays, UVA, UVB, and UVC. the organic representation of technology that pertains to the manipulation of atoms and molecules at a nanoscale construct. Identifies the actual fundament foundation that enabled the holographic simulation to be installed with efficiency, in order to coordinate, associate, manage, and control the variables of the connected simulations, greater the number of constructs, greater the sustainability and reinforcement of the simulation. For example, time on a clock is illusionary, not real, a construct. Greater the number of people that believe in the time construct, reinforces the belief that time is real. Now, add another construct, a calendar. Now, greater the number of people that believe in the calendar construct, reinforces the belief that the calendar is real. Now, add third construct, a rule policy. Now, greater the number of people that believe in the rule policy construct, reinforces the belief that the rule policy is real. Now, a basic simulation can be started. Today the Gregorian calendar reads March 7, 2023. The time reads 9 a.m. The rule is to take a vaccination. Does nature confirm these constructs to be true? No, because they are illusionary now. Multiple the number of illusionary constructs by 10 or 20. Add the AI technology control features, and add the factor that nearly everyone accepts these illusionary constructs as true. But nature does not confirm these constructs to be true, because they are illusionary and has nothing to do with nature. Another major illusionary construct is money. Currency has not true value that nature can validate without the construct. Capitalism. Commentary. It appears to be difficult to live in the current paradigm, holographic simulation without constructs. Notice the difficulty of trying to explain a matter that pertains to an illusionary construct such as calendar, day, or time. For example, in the Liberation DE JURE Decrees, reference is made to 11th day. What is a day? In this matter, a day refers to a calendar day, not a business day. What is a calendar? Holographic simulation identifies a variety of sophisticated AI technological programs that establishes the scientific modus operandi, i.e., mode of operation, predictive patterning, predetermined pattern of functioning, predestined actions, etc. for all living organisms and systems operating on planet Earth. For example, all occults and divination constructs, i.e. astrology, palmistry, numerology, gematria, tarot, sorcery, omens, prophesies, etc. practiced under the paradigm of colonial de facto system. It is the system that creates events, narratives, and timelines while simultaneously managing, controlling, manipulating, programming, conditioning, and reinforcing the goals and ideals of the colonial de facto system. Further, similar to the concept of different realms of planet Earth, there are different layers of the firmament within the different regions and continents on planet Earth, which contains different predictive programs that are embedded into the different layers of the firmament. It is the actual program that predetermines the regions, history, standards of operation, behaviors, norms, values, etc. for people, animals, vegetation, seasons, weather conditions, etc. based on science. An example is the Farmer's Almanac and its uncanny ability to predict with near accuracy seasons, weather conditions, germination periods, etc., years in advance. The Nibiruians refer to this program as the Nadi astrology. The combination of palmistry and astroastrology is a good example of utility of the ME. In brief, it is believed that a number of so-called saints created a predestined life for a certain number of human beings, who were installed with a specific template, which predetermines their parents, siblings, lifestyle, and life experiences, which is similar to the ME concept, that life experiences are pre-programmed, predestined, similar to computer operating code, which establish the profile of each character inside of a computer game. Another terminology to describe the ME concept is an archetype construct. A basic example is, a lion is a feline animal and hunts to eat. An eagle has wings and feathers to fly, etc. According to my sources, when the holographic simulation is shut off or collapses, all divine memories and supernatural abilities will be instantly restored and activated. Note, there are different substances in the food, water, and air, environment, practices, and lifestyles that sustain and reinforce the programming of the simulation. On the other hand, there are different substances, practices, and lifestyles that disrupt and disable the programming of the simulation. Accordingly, one of the greatest factors to change a being's life is to change their environment physical location, because it is regulated according to a different holographic simulation. Earth being identified as so-called Earthling. The term is generically inclusive of the terms Indigenous, Earthborn inhabitants, and human beings, but does not include entity beings. which could be non-physical. The term is not specific to either indigenous earthborn inhabitants or human being because the identifier is not readily known or confirmed. To explain further, during colonization, Earth beings could be observed in one of three capacities. 1. Earth being who is a colonial de facto perpetrator, proud and willingly works in any capacity to sustain, participate, reinforce, and perpetuate the colonial de facto system, adopted, colonial de facto lifestyle. 2. Earth being who is a colonial de facto perpetrator, and of necessity and for self-preservation, perpetuates the colonial de facto system by complying with and capitulating with the colonial de facto system regulations and conditions, adapted, colonial de facto lifestyle. And 3. Earth being who is likely an indigenous earthborn inhabitant, who is self-aware, has walked away from the colonial de facto system, have minimized dependency and reliance upon the colonial de facto system for livelihood, existence, validation and purpose, nearly -0 carbon footprint, opted out. Colonial de facto lifestyle channels describes the process of transmitting, sending and receiving information telepathically from an entity being, source from a different dimension. Generally channeled information is from the receiver's ancestors. However, depending on the receiver's vibration and frequency, other sources can communicate with the receiver, i.e. lower entities, archons, so-called black ops, and even AI technology. Contrary to popular beliefs, nearly everyone channels information on a daily basis. Again, based on the receiver's vibration and frequency, a connection established with an entity that has a compatible vibration and frequency. A perfect example is a person with either a split personality or a multiple personality disorder (MPD). The Liberation DE JURE decrees have explicitly and permanently banished all channeled information, especially with devolved and lower entities with low vibrations and low frequencies, in addition to all occult rituals, sacrifices, and practices, which are no longer significant, functional, or necessary on a liberated planet, Earth clone, a soulless duplicate being, humanoid, identified as an earthling due to the original being was an earth being. Indigenous earthborn inhabitant or human being, could be in a role of NPC non-player character similar to dogs. Clones are genetically engineered to operate with a degree of autonomous intelligence, but do not possess a pineal gland. Unity consciousness describes the focus of all evolved beings, i.e. indigenous earthborn inhabitant and extraterrestrial species on planet Earth. It is the action to live in harmony with nature and all organic natural resources. It is the mentality to fulfill the responsibility of custodian of planet Earth, to preserve, respect, and protect all natural resources from adversaries who seeks to abuse, extract, or harvest natural resources for purposes harmful to the ecosystem, beyond what is individually needed, and not compatible with nature and the high vibration of planet Earth. The term opposite of service to self. Devolved beings, i.e. aliens, human beings, low-level entities, disincarnate energies, etc. Focus on service to self and self-preservation. There are different level and layers of unity consciousness. Enlightenment path identifies the holistic lifestyle of Earth beings, but primarily specific to indigenous earthborn inhabitants. The indigenous earthborn inhabitant must possess specific qualifications, the correct genes, melanin dominant, high frequency, high vibration, self-mastery, discipline, unity consciousness, live in harmony with nature, and compatible with planet Earth, capable to elevate to a higher dimension with planet Earth. There are different level and layers of an enlightenment path. Provocateurs, term used to identify an undercover agent or spy that instigates someone to engage in an unlawful or criminal activity, as an agent of deception. Seeks to infiltrate organization leadership to compromise activities, with corruption. Definitely a perpetrator of the colonial de facto system, but may pretend to be otherwise to acquire information. Consequently, most of these underagents on the payroll of the colonial de facto system, some are not, because of their inherited allegiance and faith in the colonial de facto system. Beware of these deceptive instigators, are extremely clever and skilled at soliciting money towards a group purpose cause, advocating the need to form an organization or group, instigating rivalries or feudal disputes, distracting attention from the primary issue, and opposing the liberation of planet Earth. All groups are vulnerable to these perpetrators. Time constructs identifies one of the primary illusionary factors in the colonial de facto system. Time is an illusion, and time has nothing to do with nature. The illusionary construct has a major influence on all worldwide events, with the implementation of AI technologies. Another, separate example of a time construct is the invention of daylight savings time. This simple invention effectively manipulates the human biology, alters the sleep schedule, alters the rising schedule, reschedules activities, etc. Underworld entities, identifies the collective of species and entities that were transplanted, imprisoned, and subjugated on planet Earth, i.e. all non-physical non-earthborn entities, all non-physical earthborn entities, all spiritual energies, all desynchronites, all incarnates, all archons, all parasites, etc., bound within all realms of planet Earth. The collective conspired a liberation plan for their release from imprisonment against the devolved rogue aliens that imprisoned the eukaryotic organism. According to so-called science, scientists believe that eukaryotes organisms evolved from prokaryotes organisms approximately 2.7 billion years ago, with a complex linear DNA form and multicellular structure, subordinate rights compared to the superior prokaryotic organism, the first form of life on planet Earth, with the simple circular DNA form and unicellular structure. Cat's paw, the deceptive technique to use a different person to represent the person or group of focus. The cat's paw is the replacement, could be a clone, a double, or an imaginary person generated by AI technology. One example of a cat paw is the $5 Indians, a historical event in the United States of America, when non-indigenous species paid $5 to be listed as so-called Native American, which usurped the rights, privileges, and birthrights of the indigenous earthborn inhabitants of North America. Analogy, supposedly a true story. In the United States of America, the Emancipation Proclamation set slaves free. Consequently, many beings who were mentally enslaved chose to remain on the same plantations as slaves. Others remained on the same plantations as sharecroppers, and a few had the courage to accept a challenge to explore a new life.